Hi, my name is Ritesh Adnani. I've always wondered if you know when the BPO industry actually started. If you look back in time, and I know we have a lot of people today in the workforce who are across multiple generations, the BPO industry actually started in the early 90s when British Petroleum was one of the first few customers that actually outsourced their finance and procurement operations. After that, really, was phase one of this entire industry when there was a bunch of outsourcing that ended up happening. In fact, I had a personal ringside view into the evolution of this industry itself in the late 90s when I was in my first job after business school at Citibank. And we were actually a bunch of young management trainees who were sitting out there writing standard operating procedures for what eventually became Citibank's captive unit focused on business process outsourcing. I then actually had the chance to get on the other side of the fence and joined a business process outsourcing company itself as a service provider, much like what Firstsource is today. And I know the early 2000s was really when we encountered phase two of this industry. And we went into labor arbitrage, offshoring became much more commonplace, and you had a whole bunch of enterprises across different geographies that started outsourcing a lot of their processes, ranging from finance and accounting, HR, procurement, to some of the industry-specific processes in banking and healthcare and telecom, contact center work across to the industry itself. And then we hit really phase three, which was in the late 2007, 2008 timeframe when Lean, Six Sigma and the like started becoming popular and people looked for continuous process improvement. But around the same time also, technology started making an inroad into how business processes themselves were executed. We started seeing the early onset of automation, whether it was from workflow or as you went into phase four in the late 2015, 2016 time horizon when robotic process automation, RPA, actually became really popular. And then if you get down to the current decade that we are in, which is 2020 onwards, we started seeing the early onset of artificial intelligence. Well, today, AI is everywhere, and that's one of the reasons why we're out here to say, while the BPO industry itself has evolved over the last 30 plus years, it's evolved in a very incremental manner. And there is a dire need to change the rules of the game. That's why today, Firstsource is pleased to announce UnBPO, which is going to challenge the traditional ways of working in the BPO industry. But why now, you might ask? What's different? Well, there are a bunch of forces that are impacting us concurrently. In fact, I don't think we've ever been in an environment where there's so much unknown. Let me give you a few examples of the same. Did you know there are 72 conflicts that are happening across the world today? The geopolitical tension is immense. Did you also know that from a social standpoint, we now have more than 5 generations in the workforce, ranging from baby boomers to now beta in the workforce. And that's creating a significant amount of differences in terms of ways of working and expectations. At the same time, we've also moved economically from an environment where it was growth at all costs, post the 2008 financial crisis, to now a growth and efficiency playbook. Inflation is high. We're also seeing the resurgence of economic nationalism with tariffs and more protectionism that's starting to come about. At the same time, last year was a year of super elections. 2024 had more than 70 plus elections that came into play, where they had a bunch of democracies that were going about selecting their next leaders. At the big onset or the big shift that's however happened during the same time was on November 1st, 2022, when OpenAI launched ChatGPT. And that was a massive tectonic shift. But you know what? That seems like a moment in AI history because even in the last 2 years, the amount of developments that have happened in AI have been immense. When you combine all these different divergent forces coming together, it's a seminal moment. And that's why Firstsource is pleased to announce and challenge the traditional ways of working in the BPO industry. In fact, we want to challenge every process, every step of how the BPO industry works. And that's why today we are pleased to unveil UnBPO, which is the new way of working in the BPO industry. What does UnBPO mean? Let's talk about it. There are 10 broad principles that define the UnBPO model. The first one is deep domain experience. We believe it's very important from moving to move away from a shared services model to deep domain experience. And the deep domain experience creates holistic specialization, where we are able to bring about fit-for-purpose technology to actually help address the specific needs of our customers. It's always better to be an inch wide and a mile deep rather than trying to be everything to everybody. The second principle that is there related to this is around the fact that it's no longer around IT or BPO, services or product, but it's really around services as a software. The traditional boundaries between all of these categories that have existed in the past are all blurring. And we have the opportunity to emerge as a leader in the new services as a software paradigm. I mentioned earlier labor arbitrage, which was very prevalent and has been for the last 20 plus years in this industry, is now table stakes. People expect labor arbitrage and bake it into their business plans. The new frontier of competitive differentiation is technology arbitrage. In the last few years, a lot of our competitors and peer group, as they grew on the back of being in multiple countries and several locations. Location dispersion for the longest time has been a source of competitive advantage. However, today's day and age, location dispersion is location debt. We're now going to move to an environment where technology is going to create AI centers of excellence in fewer places where there is an abundance of talent. At the same time, to counter the current world, the future of work is also evolving. We're now firmly in an era, and I want each one of you to think about this in terms of three questions. Who's going to do the work? How is the work going to get done? And what skills are people expected to bring? If you look to answer the who question, it's really around a combination of full-time employees, part-time employees, fractional employees, crowdsourced or gig workers, and AI agents that are going to be the new archetypes that exist in the workforce. If you look at how, we will now look to break down processes into micro tasks and then determine which task gets executed by whom. And finally, what skills are people expected to bring given the new paradigms of work that are emerging. One of the other things that's also been prevalent around how the BPO industry has evolved, it has always been around traditional proxies of power. It's been around how many people report into somebody. It's been around how much revenue do you control. Guess what? These are old ways of work. This is all about deep-rooted hierarchies and the traditional way of work. The new way of working is going to be around network organizations, where we are able to prioritize speed over perfection, where we are able to hyper-personalize skills based on what each individual needs, where each one of us has our own navigator to tell us what's the next step in our career journey. Talent to value is going to be critical, where we try to create roles which add disproportionate value to the organization. At the same time, AI first is going to be a way of life. Whether that's getting the data ready for AI, whether that's making sure that AI is infused into everything we do, and whether that means that it's AI for everyone in the organization, whether you're a frontline associate, whether you're a mid-level manager, or whether you're in the senior leadership. We can't do this all ourselves. So the ninth design principle around this is really going to be around how we leverage the partner ecosystem and how we orchestrate a symphony of partnerships to actually drive a multiplier effect in our business. And last but not the least, we're going to go away from the traditional headcount-based model to helping our clients achieve the outcomes that they so desire. So cannibalizing our own business proactively, driving business outcomes, and signing up to non-linear commercial models is going to be the new way of life. I'm really excited about these 10 principles that are going to govern our way of working. Watch this space for more as we continue to share more details about UnBPO, the Firstsource way of work. Thank you.